Let's talk about everything that Yuji has been up to since the Shinjuku showdown started, but spoilers beware. All right, before we get started, special shout out to Isaiah who asked me to do this. He says, I saw people talking about how Yuji hasn't uttered a single word in the current fight, so I wanted to know if we could get a recap through his POV on everything he's said and done so far. And it's not quite true that he hasn't said a single word, but it's definitely been few and far between, and he's only spoken about very specific things, so let's get into it. So Shinjuku begins with Gojo versus Sukuna, and during this stage of the fight, Yuji, along with everyone else, is at home base just spectating, right? And Yuji does have some lines of dialogue during this, but I don't think that's really what you meant. I'm assuming you mean once he actually starts fighting, so we're not going to mention any of, the spectator dialogue that happens during this portion. Also, there are a lot of flashbacks to the planning stage of the Sukuna fight during Shinjuku. I also won't include that because I assume that's not what you're talking about, but yeah, just know that flashbacks are going to be interspersed throughout all of this. Next, after Gojo's 50% discount, Kashimo jumps in, and he also wanted to respect the 1v1, so Yuji, along with everyone else, was still just spectating. However, at this point, I imagine they were getting ready to jump in themselves. Then, as soon as the Waffled One takes his leave, that is when Yuji jumps into this fight, and it's basically all gas, no brakes from here on out. And as you can see, he doesn't even respond to Sukuna's taunts here, it's just go time. However, we then cut away to the Kenjaku Takaba fight for a few chapters, but we don't actually miss anything in the Yuji fight because we'll pick back up right where we left off. Now, when we cut back to Yuji, we see the first stage of their plan. They're trying to trap Sukuna in Higuruma's domain expansion. And during this sequence, Yuji says nothing. He is still locked in. It's on Higuruma to try and convict the King of Curses. Now, we all know how that ends up, and things start to turn a little bit south for our boys, and that's when we get the first word uttered since the fight started from Yuji. He says Higuruma as he is worried for his friend. So after Deadly Sentencing fails, this is when Kusakabe, Ino, and Choso also join the fight, and Yuji's next words are when he exclaims Choso after he takes a pretty rough blow. As the fight continues, Higuruma gets taken out by Sukuna and then teleported out by Uiui, but then we have Akotsu show up after having dealt with Kenjaku, and then we have Yuji's third word, which again is another one of his allies' names. It's at this point that we get Yuji's first words directed at Sukuna, and that's when Sukuna wonders how they've gotten so strong in a month, and we had this funny moment where Yuji and Yuta both gave different answers, but Yuji said hard work and determination. Yuji's next line of dialogue also comes during the domain expansion where he is trying to get Megami to wake up. So with the exception of that previous line, everything on Yuji's mind has been about his allies. He has been completely locked in and only concerned for their safety. Now this phase of the plan fails as well because Megami was not ready to fight back, and also Sukuna gives Yuta his very own 50% discount. However, we still had plans on deck because at this point is where we have Maki, Ino, and Kusakabe rejoin the battle with Maki stabbing Sukuna straight through the heart. Now, Yuji is largely out of commission for this portion of the fight because he is still recovering from all of his wounds, but he does give one more line of dialogue telling Megami that he is not giving up on him. So we've got Maki and Sukuna throw hands for a little bit, Ino jumps in when he can, but ultimately this leads into Kusakabe Kaisen, where for a moment he is the only one standing and has to go 1v1 with Sukuna. Now, our boy fought respectably, but we all know how that ended. And this marks the arrival of LaRue and Miguel to the fight, and also the return of Yuji and honestly everyone else. It's at this point that we run into like a 6 or 7v1 against Sukuna. And it's during this sequence that we get Yuji's next line of dialogue, which is piercing blood, the unveiling officially of his blood manipulation technique. Now, we also have a lot of black flashes happening here and there, but I don't know if those are really dialogue or not. Now, speaking of black flashes, Sukuna hits a few of his own, which starts to ramp him back up and gives him a new pathway to his domain expansion, which he opens, and then follows up with his furnace technique. And it's during all of this that we get some more dialogue from Yuji toward his brother Choso, who has sacrificed his life in order to protect Yuji from the furnace. Now, it's at this point that Yuji is justifiably feeling pretty devastated as he wonders if everyone was just killed by this furnace and if anyone is still around. And it's at this point that he starts getting really angry and starts yelling for Sukuna. Now, if we discount the joke earlier with the "we cheated" thing, this would be his first real line to Sukuna since the fight started. But when Yuji is at his lowest, you already know whose job it is to come in and give him that glimmer of hope, as we have the arrival of Toto to the fight, who has successfully swapped out everyone else from the furnace and saved them. And we once again have a Yuji line of dialogue exclaiming for one of his allies. We then have Yuji and Toto just giving Sukuna an old-fashioned jumping, and there is no dialogue in this section from Yuji. He's having internal thoughts at points, but he doesn't say anything. Now that continues until Sukuna is about to cast his domain once more, and that's when we have the return of Yuta in Gojo's body. And at this point, those two domain clash, have a quick battle, both domains get dispelled, and then Yuta passes out, or not passes out, but falls down thanks to his curse technique burnout, preventing him from using the body swap actively. However, right before that happens, we do have one more line of dialogue from Yuji where he says, "It doesn't matter if we get caught in your hollow purple, just do whatever it takes to take out Sukuna." Now with Yuta out of commission, it is Yuji and Toto jumping back in on Sukuna, and Yuji's focus once more is just for Megami to wake up. And this continues for a bit until their trump card is revealed, which is Angel using Jacob's ladder on Sukuna one more time. It's at this point that Sukuna handles Angel and also Toto, and it becomes a one-on-one with Yuji. And our boy says nothing except domain expansion. And it's at this point that we show up in the train station and Yuji says, "Come on, Unk, I got some memories to show you." And I'm not going to go through every piece of dialogue in this sequence, but it's just Yuji showing Sukuna all of the places like he grew up and spent time when he was younger. And then at the end of this sequence, we have Yuji let Sukuna know, "Hey, I can kill you. So this is your last chance for mercy and compassion." Sukuna, of course, does not accept, and then they throw hands once more. Now, during this section, Sukuna is actually talking a lot. Yuji clearly struck a nerve, and bro just cannot stop yapping and talking about how badly he's going to beat him. However, during this, Yuji is not talking back, and mostly he is focused on Megami within the soul, kind of having his moment with him there, but he's actually not giving any dialogue in real life, if we can put it that way, to Sukuna. Now, the only actual dialogue we get from Yuji during this sequence isn't even in reference to Nobara's comeback. He's clearly happy at that, but he says nothing. The only thing he says is, "Sukuna, it's time we end this cycle of curses." And this is, of course, when he proceeds to hit one of the nastiest black flashes in the entire manga. And that is where we currently are in the Shinjuku showdown. So, yes, he has been largely a man of very few words, only concerned with his allies and the plan to save Megami, but throwing a few choice words at Sukuna here and there. So yeah, that is the gist of Shinjuku from Yuji's POV. And honestly, from the moment he first jumped in with Higuruma, it was non-stop for him, except for that brief window where he had to pause and focus on his RCT while Maki was fighting Sukuna. So really, all gas, no brakes for Yuji, and I didn't even realize how little he did speak during all of this. Our boy was locked in. So again, shout out to Isaiah for prompting me with this. I enjoyed going back through this fight, especially now that we are nearing the end of everything. So thank you for that, my friend. And also thank you guys for watching.